by and large, Republicans have rallied around Donald Trump, even those who weren't directly supporting his presidential bid. Congresswoman Nancy Mace with us now from South Carolina. Congresswoman, I want to pass along some comments that we're getting now from Senator Mitt Romney, who had said that the Department of Justice and the special counsel have exercised what he calls due care. He said that the former president, quote, brought these charges upon himself by not only taking classified documents, but by refusing to simply return them. What do you think of that?
Well, I haven't had a chance to read the indictment in all 7 charges in this case, but the irony is not lost on me as someone who has not always been with the former president, as you know, Neil, but the timing of these indictments sure does look like weaponization of the DOJ against a political opponent of the president. And I think that's what people are going to see today until we get all the facts and all the information. And I'm someone who's always said, follow the facts wherever they lead us. But to see this, and as you said, this really is unprecedented at this moment in our nation's history.
Well, let me get into that, because a lot of people are saying there's no difference between what Donald Trump was dealing with, having classified documents, and, for example, what President Biden has been dealing with concerning classified documents, save the fact that Donald Trump had a lot more and seems to have misrepresented how many he had. You know, if you look at the timeline on this, Congressman, there was an issue of months of back and forth where, you know, the government, National Archives, was trying to get these documents it knew were missing and suspected he had. So after that, the president handed over 15 boxes of papers from Mar-A-Lago, and they were told at that time in 2022 that was it. Then archive officials opened the boxes. They found more than 100 classified documents scattered among the various items, and these were documents they didn't even know were missing at the time. So they went back to Donald Trump to get some more information on that, and they were handed over an additional 38 classified documents. They still suspected more were missing. The president said no, they were not. FBI agents later said there was enough that they were concerned about that they decided to raid his property in Mar-A-Lago, the most controversial act of all. But that's when they discovered still hundreds of more classified documents. In other words, what they're presenting in this series of indictments is that the president, or at least those around him, lied and repeatedly lied and obstructed justice. If that is true, do you think then that this move on the part of the special counsel is justified?
Well, when you look at the timing of it, I mean, literally the day that we were going to hold the FBI in contempt, when we got access to the 1023 form from the FBI, this is when the indictment came down. The timing of it, for me, just as an average American, is very suspicious.
But wasn't that percolating for a while, though, Congressman? I know Jack Smith has been doing this, and of course things were gathering ahead of steam as he was, you know, securing another grand jury in Florida, participants at Mar-A-Lago, and what they knew and when they knew it, that this was snowballing to that point.
If this, and I do agree with you, Neil, but if this weren't done on the same exact day that we on the Oversight Committee got access to evidence of a bribery scheme with the Biden family, I'd be singing that tune too, but that's not what happened here. And I know that Mike Pence was cleared, but, you know, Vice President, whether it's Vice President Biden or Vice President Mike Pence, they didn't have the ability to declassify documents, and both of them were found in possession of classified material. And there are over 1,800 boxes from then Vice President Biden. We know he had classified information in his unsecured garage. Is the FBI, is the DOJ, are they going to go through every single box of Biden's and treat him the same way as they've treated Donald Trump?
And to your point, Congress, we don't know exactly how many documents we're talking about in his case. And by the way, that might be borne out. You're very, concerned about that.
Treat him the same.
But let me just try to get some clarity on your part about what we're told was in those boxes and what the president knew. Now we have this tape recording that seems to indicate that the president was sharing information on some secret documents, including one that was about an invasion of Iran, and that the president is heard saying, allegedly, as president, I could have declassified it, but now I can't. Pretty explosive stuff. What do you think?
Right, and I haven't had a chance to see the transcript yet.
Understood.
But looking at Hillary Clinton, she had a private server in the bathroom of her home, was sharing classified information on unclassified channels, knowingly doing that with the classified markings. Whatever the standard is, Neil, whether you're Republican or Democrat, treat everybody by the same standard. They were all doing it, and only one person's been indicted on it.
All right, regardless of that, though, it does seem to be something that's come through a lot of Republicans. I know you've had your differences with the former president, but do you think Republicans are missing the point that to argue for defense, that the others got away with it, so Donald Trump should as well, is a wise strategy?
Well, I, as always, want to follow the facts in any investigation and any indictment, which is why it's so important that regardless of who you are, regardless of your political affiliation, that everybody is simply treated the same way. Why did a vice president of the United States have classified material next to his Corvette in his unsecured garage? He didn't have the legal authority to have those documents in his possession either, and we don't know what's in the thousands of other boxes.
Here, Congresswoman, that's what I'm asking, because that's apparently where, at this point, Jack Smith is distinguishing.
Well, Neil, I just can't get beyond the fact that the DOJ did this on the same day that I got access to information showing a bribery scheme between Ukrainian executives and Hunter and Joe Biden. The timing of it to me looks very political, looks very weaponized, and it's going to overshadow any of the facts or the indictment or the charges in this case, in my opinion.
So are you saying, just to be clear, that Jack Smith knew about you getting a chance to look at these documents concerning Joe Biden, and that he was under pressure, or maybe felt the pressure himself, to get these indictments out there to take away attention to that?
I cannot get beyond the timing of it, just as an average American. To me, it's just too suspicious. Every time that Joe Biden comes under the microscope, something like this happens. There's a story that overshadows it for Republicans. I just can't personally get beyond that. And if this were any other day, then I think we'd be having a very different conversation. But this just looks very weaponized and very political from the spot where I'm standing from today.
Asa Hutchinson, among the Republican candidates, the only one that I know of, has said that the president should take himself out of the running. Of course, he said that before, based on this, that he's going to be a drag, I'm paraphrasing here, on the party. Do you agree with that? Regardless of your views, you just stated very eloquently here.
Well, I mean, I think that's the point. I do think the Biden administration is trying to force Trump out of the primary. You heard Rachel Maddow on MSNBC basically say that he would negotiate a deal that would require him to drop out of the Republican primary. I think that's the intent here, but I do believe with the blowback we're seeing last night and today with the country rallying around Donald Trump, it'll probably have the opposite effect.
All right. We'll watch it closely. Congresswoman, always good seeing you.